welcome back to Rush Roundtable. We've hit episode 250. So in celebrating said fact, we decided to get a little controversial because since the world is going so smoothly and everything's running nice and there's so much harmony in the world, we're going to have a debate. Not just any debate. Permanent waves versus moving pictures. So, not that anyone here needs the reminder, but Permanent Waves came out January 14th, 1980, produced by Terry Brown and gave us Spirit of Radio, Free Will, Jacob's Ladder, Entree New, Different Strings, and Natural Science. Our Permanent Waves team is represented by Chris Springer and Paul Cormier. And then we've got Moving Pictures, released February 12th, 1981, also produced by Terry Brown, gave us Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, YYZ, Limelight, The Camera Eye, Witch Hunt, Part 3 of Fear, and Vital Signs. And that will be represented by Eric Winter and Rob Buchta. I am Paul Simon, not to be confused with Paul Simon. And my co-moderator tonight is going to be John Lembo. So what we are going to do, we have a series of questions that we've prepared for everybody. Some will be the same to both teams and some will be a little bit shaken up. But to get the housekeeping out of the way, please like and subscribe with the buttons you see below. And even more importantly than that, keep an eye on our sponsor links you'll see down there. Click on those, buy stuff from them. They're why we're still here, and you watching is why we do this. So that being said, who's ready to argue? All right. So what we're going to do is I've got an authentic Canadian $2 coin here, Kalatui. From our
steal that across the border.
From our last trip, I smuggled it, so they'll be coming after me for the $2.
Contraband.
And since Paul is our resident Canadian, you can call it for your team heads, which would be the queen, or tails, which apparently is looks like a polar bear.
Correct.
So call for your team to see if you're going to answer first or not.
Tails.
Call it heads or tails.
Tails. Tails.
Polar bear it is.
Okay. Could you not hear me? I know I'm Canadian, but gosh.
You forgot to say sorry before you answered, so I couldn't hear you. So,
you're funny. So I'm sorry. Was it tails? Sorry, was it tails?
It was tails.
It was a polar bear.
It was the polar bear. Okay.
Polar bear. So polar bear team goes first. All right. Okay, so the way our clock works, by the way, is John and I are going to be exchanging questions. I'll start with the first one, and John will be our timekeeper, and we'll keep flipping. You'll have 2 minutes per team on the question. Opposite team, if you care to rebut, but you're going to be asked the same questions with the one exception anyway, so you'll get your chance. If you suddenly feel the bubbling need to chime in with a rebuttal, you let us know. So, question to the Permanent Waves team. Rush fans are just as passionate about their favorite or what they feel is the best song as what they might feel is the least best or worst. All Rush is good, Rush folks. Don't jump us. It's a debate. We have to have some derision here. Just as passionate as what they feel is the least best song on the album. Why is the least best song on Permanent Waves better than the least best song on Moving Pictures? Identify them in your answers. Permanent Waves team.
Go ahead,
I'll
Paul.
start with throwing it at me. All right, sounds like a plan. I think we had discussed this, and I think we both agreed that the worst, best, or best, worst, whatever you want to call it, for Permanent
Least
Waves.
awesome.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that works. Was Different Strings. To me, it kind of just has a completely different vibe from the rest of the album. But it's still a great song, let's be honest here. But that's the one we picked. But I said it's better than Vital Signs, because Vital Signs to me really sticks out like it doesn't belong on Moving Pictures. There's always been the argument made that Vital Signs could be on Signals, right? Because it's very synthy, it's very, I guess, away from the rest of the theme of Moving Pictures. So that's why I feel it. But Different Strings is a completely different vibe than the rest of the album, but it's a very, I don't want to say it, very soft, melodic, piano-y, courtesy of Hugh Syme. Just a beautiful song, but it kind of fits outside of the rest of the theme. I'm not sure if Chris, you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that's basically the same thing that I think. lyrics not written by Neil, but still nice lyrics anyway. Not too much drumming in there. It's kind of a solitary piece. It's almost like, like Paul McCartney and Eleanor Rigby. They didn't have enough of the rest of the Beatles in it. So that's I would say the same thing. And about and I would say that about Vital Signs as well. That was more like it was a nice transition from moving pictures into Signals, but yeah, it does stand out a lot as being completely different than the rest of moving pictures.
Okay. So, moving pictures team, same question. Rush fans are just as passionate about what they feel is the best as what they might feel is the least strong, least best, insert term, song on the album. So, what is your least best song on your album, and why is it better than the least best song on their album? You've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I would concur. Vital Signs is definitely the worst on moving pictures, but better than Different Strings because Vital Signs has more energy. The keyboard parts are better. Musically, it's a better song, and it's not a love song. So those are my criteria for why I feel Vital Signs is better than Different Strings. Different Strings is like for me, it's kind of a wussy song a little bit. I'm not really into that kind of stuff. So that's my 10 cents. I don't know if you want to add anything, Eric, to that.
No, it's funny that all four of us agree on what the least awesome song is between these two albums. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Vital Signs is perhaps the weakest off of Moving Pictures, and Different Strings is the weakest off of Permanent Waves. I think, however, one of the strengths of Vital Signs is what our counterparts on the Permanent Waves team is trying to argue its weakness is, and that is that Vital Signs is so different, is such a different vibe than the rest of the album that it just doesn't work. I would argue that Vital Signs is totally different than anything Rush had ever done up to that point. Different Strings is not. Different Strings feels like it's another iteration of a slower song with a slower vibe, a vibey song, something like Madrigal or something like Here Again. They had never done something as reggae or ska inspired as Vital Signs. It was something very different, very unique, and that's what makes it better than Different Strings.
I concur.
But it doesn't have that awesome guitar that you have at the end of Different Strings, which I think is what separates it from songs like Madrigal or Here Again. Madrigal was the first. I thought the exact same thing. Like, this is the Permanent Waves is Madrigal, but which was also a Getty song, was it not? But I just think the guitar at the end of that song kind of makes up for it.
The fading soul that we'll never know the end to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But Rob, to your point, it's not a wussy song. You stop that.
Oh, come on.
There's no such thing as a Rush
I think that's
wussy song.
Well, I mean, Getty's bass line is, it's a little tougher, I guess. Yeah.
Of course, a Canadian would say there's no such thing as a wussy song.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're going to start this sorry again? All right. Sounds good. Game on.
There you go.
I'll throw it over to John for question 2.
All righty, guys. Good start. Good debate. Okay, so we all know that both of these albums are chock full of great moments, okay? The question is, what is the best moment on your particular album? This could be the best song, the best lyric, a solo, a chord change, whatever you want. What is the best moment on your album? And we'll go with the Permanent Waves team, kick things off.
Yeah, I'll jump right in. There's, as you said, many moments, but it's got to be the intro of Spirit of Radio. That's one of just that intro part is one of the greatest things I think they've ever written. It starts out with this crazy guitar lick that it's what you would imagine sound waves look like. You can hear it, you can see it when you're listening to it. You see these things moving around, and then underneath that, you have this unbelievable precision and tightness between Getty and Neil that almost feels like they're just playing free time underneath Alex, and then they culminate it by recreating the sound of a radio dial turning with into that thing, unbelievable. And then it comes into this straight beat that completely blows your mind once it kicks in, and then into a gorgeous melody. So the intro to Spirit of Radio.
That's one of them. I had a couple in mind. My main one was the bridge section of Free Will. Basically, three boys just jamming out, showing off their chops. Like, Neil keeping the beat in the background, Getty going on this crazy bass line, and Alex is doing his thing with soloing on top of that. But it's what, a minute and a half, just three boys just rocking out. It's a mind-blowing moment on the album. Sorry. The other one I think was the transition in Natural Science from the initial tide pools to hyperspace. That transition from that kind of this, it just blew me away when I first heard it. But there's a lot of these moments throughout the album, but that's the ones that first came to my mind and just stuck out to me.
And absolutely, and I'll add to the Free Will thing, because that was going to be a moment of mine. But I would even carry it into Getty's vocal, which is one of his best performances. That it's not really shrieking, but it's right at the beginning of the '80s. That's when Getty really started to sing, and that performance is fantastic and always unbelievable live.
All right, good stuff. Moving Pictures team, your turn.
Yeah, I would say every song on Moving Pictures is the best moment. But if I were to pick one, I would say the opening to the solo in Limelight. So just the way he starts it out, meanders around a little bit. It's got, just a very spacey feel to it. I think it just fits perfectly to like Neil's sentiment of what he felt about his fandom, kind of coming at him. The phrasing of the solo is top notch. It's totally signature. Exactly, just from the tone of the solo, that's Alex right there. So for me, that's probably the best moment out of all the best moments of Moving Pictures. That one stands out the most for me. So
Yeah, I agree with Rob where every song on Moving Pictures could have the best moment on the album. Like he mentioned, Limelight. I think side A on Moving Pictures especially, there's an iconic moment for all of Rush's discography on every single song on side A. The solo in Limelight, the solo back and forth in YYZ, or the halftime in YYZ, the Wind in My Hair section, Red Barchetta. But what I chose is the opening growl for Tom Sawyer. It is possibly the most defining, most iconic, most recognizable sound of any song Rush has ever made. As soon as you hear that, anybody who's never heard another Rush song in their life will say, that's Rush. That's Tom Sawyer. I know that. That's awesome. And that's what makes this the best moment on the album.
Dang it. That's hard to rebut.
Spirit of Radio is pretty identifiable as well. That and nearly as big a radio hit. But if you're going to drag the whole album into it, yeah, I could. There's moments on every single song of that album. I just told you about the guitar solo at the end of Different Strings. We got Natural Science from beginning to end. The whole freaking thing is awesome. Entre Nous, you kidding me? That part, I love that so much. In fact, I trying to do research for this, listening to the beginning of, I was trying to let me listen to the album. I couldn't get through Spirit Radio because I had to keep going back. I got to hear that beginning again. I got to hear that beginning again. And I know I'm not the only person who's done
that. Guilty.
No fact checking. All right. All right.
Real quick, if I may throw in one more note.
By all means.
You'll note that Chris said Spirit of Radio is nearly as identifiable as Tom Sawyer. I
said no. I said it's nearly as big a radio hit.
Okay. Either way.
We may go there. Stay tuned. All right. Next question, gentlemen.
Maybe.
Each of these albums has what many would consider an epic Rush track. Natural Science versus The Camera Eye. Tell us why your epic is more impressive than your opponent's. Permanent Waves team, 2 minutes on the clock. Natural Science versus Camera Eye. Why is yours better?
You can go ahead, Paul.
Sure. Natural Science rocks, period. But it's divided into three distinctive parts. compared to the camera eye. You got that initial, like that kind of like the water and then the slow guitar, and then it just transitions into this hyperspace in 7/8, and it just gets my blood going every single time. The way the song was composed just makes it an awesome, awesome song. A couple of guitar solos thrown in there for fun, because Alex just wanted to, but it's just, and it was a staple on their concerts for a long time. Not as much as other songs, but it was one of the more popular songs that they wanted to see live. I fortunately got to see it live, so it was awesome, but that's my side. Chris?
Yeah. I mean, Natural Science was, I don't know, I was probably 15 when I first heard that song, and that was always my go-to song anytime I wanted to introduce somebody to Rush. Listen to this. And that hasn't changed. It's still that way. It's a perfect nod to the prog era, but it's not like dark and proggy. It's kind of bright and proggy and very energetic. Musical chops out the ass on full display, and then it had been on my wish list live for many years, and when they finally revived it for Test for Echo, I was so freaking happy to finally see it live. And then they brought it back again for Vapor Trails, right? They brought it back again for Snakes and Arrows, and then again on R40. Alex said it was one of the most fun songs to play. It always kept them on their toes. Getty argued that he had never seen Alex actually play it on his toes, but that was him. Just a fantastic song. Camera Eye is a great song. Takes a little time to get going, but it's really about the chops and the musicality of Natural Science for me.
All right, well laid out, gentlemen. Moving Pictures team. Again, each of these albums have what many would consider to be an epic Rush track. Natural Science versus the Camera Eye. Tell us why your epic is more impressive than your opponent's.
I think thematically, with the Camera Eye, kind of fits the theme of the album better than, say, Natural Science. I think just the way they arranged the song was a bit more fluid. I know there were issues with when they were putting together Natural Science in terms of composing it. It was kind of an endeavor, so to speak. I could be wrong about the history, but that's sort of the impression I get from the tune. I think just the idea of, the freedom, imagery, all these things, the travel aspect of the Camera Eye is really strong. You could hear the traffic sounds of New York, then you could hear the bells in London. So I think just seems to be more cohesive in terms of their presentation of the song. Musically, it's more tight in terms of the arrangement, because with Natural Science, it was a bit more subjective matter going on. But with the Camera Eye, it just seemed to me that their arrangement proficiency was actually increasing, and their songcraft was increasing. So I think it's a stronger tune just in that aspect, and the tone of the song is got a very warm tone. You can feel yourself being in New York on the first half and then being in London on the second half. So I think just the travel part of that is so vivid that it just fits better. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with how much more cohesive the Camera Eye is as a song over Natural Science. Natural Science is sort of a Frankenstein song, right? They have bits of Natural Science and they have bits of this other song they had wrote, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. They're like, oh, we're not going to use that, but we're going to mash it in there. And you can really tell in Natural Science when it goes from this part, okay, now we're in this part, and now we're in this part. Whereas Camera Eye, it flows very smoothly all the way throughout. And I also think, just on a more granular level, I think the Camera Eye has Getty's best bass line. Subjectively, I think objectively it's up there with among his best, but it's my personal favorite. It's incredibly melodic. It might not be his most difficult. It's incredibly melodic. The guitar solo is insane. The roar of the crowd when he'd play that guitar solo live, just absolutely electric. And Camera Eye, like Rob said, it's a prog song. It's an epic, but it just flows so much better than Natural Science does.
And it would have been nice to hear that guitar solo more, but they never played that song except for the Time Machine and on Moving Pictures.
They were too busy playing all the other songs from Moving Pictures.
Right. Except Witch Hunt.
Who let this guy in? Jeez.
I didn't like when they cut the second guitar solo in Natural Science live. I didn't care for that. I didn't like that. So they should have both guitar solos in Natural Science. So
Yeah, they trimmed down both of those songs live. They tightened up Camera Eye a bit, and yeah, tightened up. But I think
Natural
they
sides.
probably did that more for time than anything else because they had a lot of songs by the time they got around to playing that live again.
All right, before this gets ugly, back to you, John.
All right, guys. Well, we kind of alluded to this earlier, but now here's the question. Each of these albums, of course, has what we consider maybe the most popular radio-friendly Rush tracks there are. The Spirit of Radio on Permanent Waves, Tom Sawyer on Moving Pictures. Tell us why you believe your radio hit is more impressive than your opponent's. Permanent Waves, get rolling.
I'll start. It's the Spirit of Radio is hands down. Again, I've already talked about the intro, the bright, happy verses, the different musical styles that are thrown into that thing from the difference between the first verse and the second verse in terms of what Neil is playing and the power chords and all of that. Great guitar solo, the reggae breakdown, the chromatic runs that again mimic the twinkle, the turning of the dial. It's the best concert opener ever. They opened, I want to say 5 tours off the top of my head. But I'm not sure. I'd have to check that. But it was a frequent opener or a frequent closer, and also a frequent opener of an encore. And what the hell is Tom Sawyer about? That's the thing. The Spirit of Radio. It's very straightforward. We all know what it's about. Tom Sawyer has these weird lyrics written by Pi Dubois that Neil had to try and make sense out of into this thing. It's a great song, but what the hell is it about? And I never once went to a Rush concert waiting to hear Tom Sawyer. But Spirit of Radio, I always waited for.
What he said. No, no, seriously. But no, Chris did pretty much wrap up what I was thinking about the song. Damn, things written about radio. But and it also got played more times than Tom Sawyer did. But if you really think about it, you'll figure out why. Because it came out before Tom Sawyer. But other than that, I mean, it's and you're right. It has a special place for me because when I first saw Rush the very first time in Time Machine Tour, that's what they opened up with. So every time I hear that opening riff, I get transported back to that concert and just the crowd just going nuts with that riff, right? So
I was 16 on the Grace Under Pressure tour, and my friends and I kept going, "What are they going to open? Where are they going to open?" We had no idea. And on those first, I turned to my friend. I was like, "It's Spirit," and we went absolutely bananas. So,
all right, top that. Moving Pictures.
Oh, you're the moderator too now. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Moving Pictures. You guys are up. Nice.
Yeah, well, Tom Sawyer definitely isn't about what Cartman said it was about, on the opening film to this song, but this is a completely signature opening, and it's the perfect opening tune for this album. I mean, the placement is completely appropriate. It showcases the band completely. You got Neil's drum solo bit in there, which is completely like an air drum classic. I mean, the bass line, the guitar solo. I mean, there's way too many things in this song, and it goes all the way through. There's no, meandering of like, oh, here's the radio dial switching from song to song kind of stuff. Just gets right to the point. It's about a song about travel, and that's what it is. And it's a complete classic tune. There's complete perfect concert opener as well. Spirit of Radio's, it's a great. I could take no issue with it being a great opening song, but Tom Sawyer, you can't beat it.
Yeah, Tom Sawyer is perfect. Neil has frequently described it as among his favorite to play. He said it's a feast to play. Everything gets a feature, the vocals, the synth, the guitar, the bass, the drums. It is Rush's most penetrative song in terms of the mainstream culture, as in people might not know any other song, they're gonna recognize Tom Sawyer. Chris said that he never waited to hear Tom Sawyer. He waited to hear The Spirit of Radio. Perhaps that's because Tom Sawyer went to number 8 on the mainstream charts, whereas The Spirit of Radio only made it to 51 in the US. So we just heard Tom Sawyer more. People liked Tom Sawyer more. That's an objective fact according to the Billboard charts. You can't rebut that. That's just a numbers game. And I apologize. I'm just reading facts at this point.
I would
just a bunch of lyrics that Pi Dubois threw at Neil and said, "Figure this out," right? Yeah. Okay.
If you put a bunch of monkeys at a computer, could they eventually spit out Tom Sawyer and put it at number 8 on the charts? I don't think so.
Who's going to clean those typewriters?
All the works of Shakespeare, right?
Good arguments on both sides.
Well done.
But I would also argue that well, I'll get to that later. Never mind. Let's go on.
Good
Gotta
point.
keep some
Good
cards
point.
around
Yeah,
just in case. All right. So this is where the questions are going to slightly vary. So, Permanent Waves team. The documentary for classic albums features 2112 and Moving Pictures, but not Permanent Waves. Why do you think this is? Why do you believe it should have been? 2 minutes on the clock.
Am I doing this one, Chris?
Yeah, you can go ahead. I have some thoughts, but you can start.
Yeah, basically 2112 was picked because that was their breakthrough album. And then Moving Pictures was picked because that was probably their most commercially successful album, the most recognized album from sheerly based on album sales. But, you know, Permanent Waves was like their departure or their start of their departure from the prog era. You know, they're like going into the late 70s into the 80s. Hemispheres is really difficult for them to record. It almost burned them right out. So this was like, to me, I see Permanent as a fresh start, and they're changing their kind of songwriting styles to kind of get more into the mainstream. Does it have the same amount of sales as the other albums? No, but it still deserves the attention because I don't think you have Moving Pictures without Permanent Waves. That's the album that started that trend of the shorter songs, the more radio friendly length songs. There's still some longer songs in it. That's Rush. They're going to have their short songs are still 5.5 minutes, but that's the transition album. You know, it deserves more recognition that it does have right now. Chris, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That show was really about, as you said, the breakthrough album and just what was more popular. But as Neil says in that documentary, that while 2112, he said, was like a seed that kind of grew, Moving Pictures landed in fertile fields. Like they were already transitioning from a theater band to an arena band with the popularity just of Permanent Waves. And then, you know, Moving Pictures was right place, right time. And Neil has said at that time that was when they started to get more famous. He said a lot of that was transitory. They were that band, remember, you know, in the summer of 1981 after that came out. So I think that Permanent Waves was more important to the musical growth of the band than I think it was as important to the musical growth as 2112 was, even though they had tried the epic on the album before. I just think that show featured really just the popularity of those albums, not necessarily, you know, what I would consider more of a creative breakthrough.
As you'll be getting a different question, Rob and Eric, any rebuttal at all to that? Don't have to. Didn't know if you had one or not. You can be sufficiently dispassionate.
All
All right.
chime in at the same time.
You want to get a pregnant pause in there.
Love
like
it.
a car dying. Okay. John, question over to Moving Pictures, please.
Okay, Moving Pictures team. Fans often consider Permanent Waves to be their transition album, kind of what Paul said, shifting from the prog 70s era of Rush into the 80s. Shorter songs, a little more reliance on synths. Why do you think this was a good shift? And would you agree that Permanent Waves did in fact open the door for Moving Pictures?
Yeah, I have to agree with that for sure. It definitely helped the band, like you mentioned, John, with the song arrangement, you know, kind of moving into like, you know, like the fertile field aspect. I definitely have some concurrence with that. I definitely can't disagree too much with that because, you know, without the one, you can't have the other. So that makes complete sense. The only thing I would say with the record is that everything but the song Vital Signs, I think, could have been taken off and the album would have been just as strong without that song. So I think that I don't think you can really say, no, it wouldn't have any effect, you know, in terms of what happened on Moving Pictures if you didn't have Permanent Waves. But I think just the song craft was so much tighter. as the natural progression. They realized they want to tighten things up a bit more, and I think this album achieved that objective of tighter songs, tighter arrangements, and just the sort of continuity was the big thing for me on this record. Just has an overall warmth to it, and it's consistent from top to bottom. So yeah, so I agree that it definitely, you know, the progression was definitely helpful from Permanent Waves to Moving Pictures. Sure.
Yeah, I agree. It was a good shift. I think it was a natural evolution in their songwriting from, the debut to 2112 to Permanent Waves to Moving Pictures. And as they went through the synth era, uh, I think most Rush albums can be paired up with another. And I think Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures make a very natural pair in terms of their similarities. Uh, but that doesn't mean that they're equals necessarily. Paul C said that we don't have Moving Pictures without Permanent Waves. I would say we don't have 2112 without Caress of Steel. There aren't a whole lot of people that are saying Caress of Steel is objectively better than 2112. Uh, it- you also said it's more important for their musical growth, Permanent Waves was. So that's fine if they're growing, but they perfected it with Moving Pictures. Like Rob said, their songwriting was more concise, their arrangements were more concise. It's a much more cohesive album than Permanent Waves. And so the shift was good, but it shifted to something better.
So are you saying that they reached perfection with Moving Pictures and that was it? They didn't continue to grow beyond that?
They continued to evolve.
Grow.
Evolve as opposed to grow. Semantics.
Yeah.
I'm
See,
always
right.
about semantics.
No, but I will say about Caress of Steel, Caress of Steel was a stepping stone to 2112, but it was Caress of Steel, as good as it is, completely half baked, and not just because they were, it's not quite ready for prime time. You know what I mean?
that's true. I read Getty's book.
Yeah.
Oh man,
No
people were like,
parallel with me
"Woo!"
muting my mic and coughing, by the way. There's no relation to that whatsoever.
I think Alex referred to that album as dripping with hash oil at some point.
Last reverb.
All
Oh,
right,
gosh.
altering the format here slightly. Each of you is going to have 1 minute. Each participant will have 1 minute to answer this. So we will go in the order of Paul, then Chris, then Rob, then Eric. Both of these records have a plethora of radio hits, but feature some classic deep cuts. What do you think is the deepest cut from your album? Why do you enjoy it? 1 minute on the clock. Paul, deep cut that you enjoy most off your album.
Probably one of my all-time favorite songs from the band is Jacob's Ladder. If you ask most Rush fans, Permanent Waves, they'll usually spit out, Spirit of Radio, Free Will, Natural Science. That's the most common ones. But this Jacob's Ladder doesn't get the credit that it deserves. And I consider one of their most, I guess, proggy songs. You want to call it that? And I know you're not supposed. I know you can fact check if you want. I looked it up online. They only played the song 149 times overall. They played on the first tour, and then they parked it right up until R40. And I'm glad they brought it back for R40 so I could see it live. Like that was just they started that intro and I just melted in my seat. I was just like, oh my God. So I love that song. To me, it's very underrated. For some reason, Getty wasn't a fan of the song. I've seen him say that in an interview, and I was like, what? But that's my underrated. People need to give that one more of a chance.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's kind of easy to say that Different Strings has to be the deepest, but that doesn't mean that Jacob's Ladder is not deep. Doesn't mean that Entre Nous is not a deep cut. In fact, I would even say that Entre Nous is probably my favorite deep cut on the album. Even though I think Snakes and Arrows was the only time they played that live, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they played this on the Permanent Waves tour, which I didn't know even when I saw the Snakes and Arrows tour. But yeah, I just think that that's kind of an underrated song that should have been a bigger hit than it was. It's kind of a step forward lyrically. I think for Neil, it was an early example of him getting into relationships between people. I don't think it's necessarily about a particular couple, but about sort of humankind in general. And I just think it's a great song, underappreciated. by the mainstream, not by Rush fans.
All right, Rob.
Yeah, I would say Witch Hunt. Witch Hunt has this great introduction, nice and quiet, and it gets more foreboding, moodier. The mob comes in, it's that high production value of the song. It's the way it kind of moves, through again, fitting the theme of the record. The overall nature of the theme, we didn't talk too much about the theme part, but the message, timeless message on the song, the cinematic part of the tune, which is again fits right into the album. I think it's just a perfect fit as a deep cut. I always preferred side two of Moving Pictures anyway, and then hearing that song started off was like just pristine. Just love the way it started. So that's my pick.
I agree. I think Witch Hunt is the best deep cut. We've already talked about Vital Signs in the Camera Eye, so yeah, Witch Hunt is phenomenal. It's among Rush's most atmospheric songs. And like you said, Rob, in terms of it being cinematic, it's a song where if you pull the lyrics out of it, you'd still get the vibe of the song. You still know it's a very foreboding, it's aggressive song, and it's big. When they played it live, it's big. This is definitely one of those songs where it's like, there's no way it's only three guys making that music, and it's only three guys making that music. Extremely impressive that they could pull it out in concert and play it as successfully as they did. It's a great song.
I think Grace Under Pressure was the first time they did it. It was because they couldn't. I think that was probably the first time Neil had a little foot pedal that he could do the cowbell
Right.
Thing with, and the other sequencers and stuff, and other things that they were able to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't think I'm going to slip in any surprise questions this time around. So that being said, John, go ahead and give us the last one.
All right, guys. It's simple as it gets. Have at it. Why is your album better than your opponent's? And I guess we'll kick it off with the Permanent Waves team, or 1 minute left, I guess. So go at it.
All right. Well, I'll start. Again, I think that this was more important to the band's growth. I've always thought that Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures was Rush's equivalent to the Beatles' Revolver and Sgt. Pepper. Sgt. Pepper is universally accepted by the mainstream as the best Beatles album, the greatest album of all time, blah, 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 blah. But if you talk to most Beatle fans, they're going to say, I kind of like Revolver a little better than that, because that sort of opened the door to that. And they started to get a little bit more experimental with their music and everything like that. And that's exactly what Rush was doing. Neil says in the documentary that it was Moving Pictures where they had that idea of the band solo, and they like to play individually but as a band. But listen to Free Will, listen to Natural Science. Free Will is just one of those things. There's so much going on in that 60 seconds that I always used to call the craziest 60 seconds in rock. But it's not noise, and again, that vocal. But anyway, I'm getting by myself. But I just think that it was a more important album to the band, and the Moving Pictures certainly more important to their success. But the people wouldn't have been there without Permanent Waves.
I don't really have much more to add to that, to be quite honest. I mean, that's pretty much summarizes what I think of Permanent Waves. It was the combination of prog moving into the next phase slowly into Moving Pictures, which will move into Signals and the whole synth era. But just like, it's a good combination, right? It's their transition album, and that's why I think it's better. But at the end of the day, it's subjective to the listener, and everybody has their favorites. Just unfortunately, Moving Pictures is the most commercially one, so everybody seems to gravitate to Moving Pictures for some reason. It's a great album.
Yeah, I mean, I was at my doctor's office recently, and this is before my Clockwork Angels wristband broke, and he's like, "Oh, Rush, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "They did Tom Sawyer, right?" And I was like, "Yes, they did Tom Sawyer."
You have 45 minutes. Here's Permanent Waves.
Rob?
Yeah, the Moving Pictures thing, I would say it's more accessible musically, and the band themselves would say that as well. Geddes has cited that as a thing with this record, that people If you try and turn someone onto Rush, typically Moving Pictures is the album that's offered up. And Geddy himself said that. So I think that's something that why is preferable, because if you try and turn somebody onto Rush, this is typically the album that you would do it with. Not to discount anything else, but this seems to be the thing that goes with that type of referral from the band itself. If the band's saying it, that's top notch for me too. So there you have it.
Our Permanent Waves opposition has so kindly conceded that Moving Pictures was more important to the band's success, and that's certainly true. Moving Pictures went #1 in Canada. Permanent Waves only went #3. Moving Pictures went #3 in the US. Permanent Waves only made it to #4. Moving Pictures secured a Grammy nomination with YYZ. I don't believe Permanent Waves got any Grammy nominations. But in terms of being more important to the band, every single song on Moving Pictures was played live. I believe there was one song on Permanent Waves never played live that was different strings. Oh, but there's too much going on. Hugh Syme played the synths on different strings. Hugh Syme played the synths on Witch Hunt, and they figured it out because they wanted to play it. When they got to the 40th anniversary of Moving Pictures, the Time Machines tour started in 2010, which would be the 40th anniversary of Permanent Waves. They didn't play Permanent Waves all the way through. They played Moving Pictures all the way through. So they thought the most important album to us, the band, is Moving Pictures, and they celebrated accordingly.
I've never been more proud.
The rebuttal is your math isn't mathing. 40 years. Are you kidding me? It's 30.
30 years. 30-year anniversary.
Oh my God.
Your
You
math
played
is
every single
unmathing.
song on the album. Yeah, because Time Machine tour, that was the whole sell of it. We're going to play Moving Pictures start to finish.
Well,
But I
then-
get why.
But
But
what
then I
about
know.
Why not play every song on Permanent Waves, Paul?
Yeah.
They played.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tons of sound bites.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're going to pay attention to things like Billboard charting and stuff like that, then Counterparts is a better album than Moving Pictures, because that made it to #2. And the only reason that album didn't debut at #1 is because the second Pearl Jam album came out on the same day. And as far as I don't know, I forgot what I was going to say. I guess that was really my main point.
Hold him back.
Yeah, like Grammy nominations. Who gives a shit really about the Grammy nomination? Who cares?
I've heard that argument before. I can't remember where. Oh, I do, but I'm not going to talk about it. It's all good.
Yeah, I remember it too.
You really think that Camel song was better than YYZ? I mean, that's what won the Grammy. So consider the source. It was said by the Police. Wasn't that the Police? The Police had a something about a camel. That was the instrumental that
the
won.
best instrumental Grammy. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you. Not too much bloodshed tonight. That being said, we want to thank everybody for watching. Commenters, we know you love these albums. What we'd like to hear from you, along with your favorite, because I guarantee that's what you'll put, is who do you feel made the stronger point? I will let in the fact that these debaters did not all four necessarily choose these albums because they were their favorite. It's what they wanted to debate. So who debated their point more strongly? If you have to flip a Tui, go ahead. That being said, do please like, comment, subscribe so you never miss great Rush content. Share them to your favorite Rush social media pages. Get it out there with us. And don't forget to visit our sponsor links, which are again below. What comes from above is so below. And that being said, on behalf of all of us, I just want to thank you for being here. Gentlemen, excellent job. John, thanks. You're not the best color man in the business for nothing. And we will see you as we start our coverage for Snakes and Arrows next week, finally.